Felipe, what did you bring?
I brought a quote for us today, Valerie.
What's your quote?
It goes like this. There are dreamers and there are believers. I'm a dream believer.
Thank you. Okay, we'll find out more about that quote in a moment. Kevin, what about for you? What did you bring?
So, not to be a copycat of Felipe, but I did bring a quote as well.
Too late.
Actually, I brought two, so I'm actually gonna give you both. So, first one is by a novelist. His name's Robert McKee. I'm obsessed with this quote. I use it in a lot of trainings, but it says this: "Write every day, line by line, page by page, hour by hour. Do this despite fear, for above all else, beyond imagination and skill, what the world is asking of you is courage. Courage to risk rejection, ridicule, and failure. As you follow the quest for stories told with meaning and beauty, study thoughtfully and then write boldly. And like the hero of a fable, your dance will dazzle the world." And the second quote is super short. It says, "Stories are just data points with a soul." That's by Brene Brown. So
Wow, all three quotes. We're going to start to peel those back. You brought a lot of interesting things here. Well, first of all, welcome to the two of you, and welcome to all of you who might be tuning in to this episode of Not Quite Strangers. This podcast is dedicated to bringing people together, right, to build connection, also to inspire curiosity. And who knows, if we're lucky, we'll even challenge the status quo. And I'm your host. My name is Valerie Hope. And really, this is an opportunity to bring two people together who've never met. Actually, technically, Felipe and Kevin have met on social media, on LinkedIn. I introduced the two of them. It's been 6 months or so now. But I know Felipe and I go way back. He and I used to work for Hyatt. Gosh, well, I don't know, when did we meet, Felipe? Like 10 years ago?
Probably, yeah.
Like 8 or 10 years ago now, I think, when my assignment was to go to Brazil and support the hotels there. And Felipe and I had an opportunity to connect. And he was at the time the learning manager. And so he was definitely instrumental in making sure that my visits were successful. And ever since then, we've just developed this great friendship. Now that both of us are out of Hyatt, just connect all the time. And he's also a co-producer of this podcast. So you can't get away. Right here. And Kevin and I met 6 months ago or so, yeah. Right? I'm working on a project for Anheuser-Busch, and you're there as their VP. I'm going to get your title wrong. I'm sorry, VP of...
No, I wish it was VP. It's Director of Leadership and Learning.
Director of Leadership and Learning.
Hey, look, maybe we're speaking the future into existence. Yes. We'll put it in the ethos and we'll call it a day.
Love it. So leadership development, Director of Leadership Development. And the wonderful thing about you, Kevin, is when I heard you speak, especially around the areas of diversity and inclusion at Anheuser-Busch, I was really taken by just how transparent you were and some of the things that you shared about your life and the impact, and also your depth of commitment to not only the organization, but like how you show up in the organization as as a model for the leaders that you were sharing and teaching. And I thought, oh my goodness, I know exactly who I need to introduce you to. So at the time, it was a LinkedIn intro. The two of you had a little back and forth email, and then nothing. There was really no opportunity to connect until today. So today we get to see what happens after LinkedIn fails.
Hey, look, we purposely saved it for this podcast.
Yeah.
I love it. Why did you say yes for the both of you? Because Felipe, you have no obligation, even as co-producer here. But and Kevin, neither do you. You and I don't have like a personal connection necessarily outside of the work. So I'm curious why you both said yes to meeting in person on a podcast.
Great question. I mean, I think for me, when you presented the opportunity to come onto a podcast, I relished the opportunity to get into a creative ecosystem with others who desire human connection. And so I appreciate that a lot. And matter of fact, that's a huge theme of why I'm in learning, and the way I engineer learning is the desire of human connection. Because when you can make those things happen, people tend to remember what you talk about. They tend to remember and apply the advice that they were given. This is the Simon Sinek moment of like, people don't care about what you do. They care about why you do things. And I think human connection, you understand the why about it. And so having the opportunity to do that, I'm all about it all day. So
awesome. Yes. Thanks, Kevin.
I mean, why not, right? You're such a great connector, and yeah, I've been always very curious about like everything. That's another experience in my checklist, right? Why not? So and having the opportunity to connect with people from different parts of the world is something that I truly value. So it's great to finally meet Kevin. So thanks, Kevin.
no, happy to meet you. Happy to be here. And thanks for Valerie for making the connection and doing the back labor on all of this to bring this together.
Oh, well, I'm grateful the two of you decided to just say, yes, let's have a conversation. I don't think everything always gets from LinkedIn to actual real life. And I think this is one of those great things, specifically because the two of you are also both so committed to learning, growing yourselves, right? Being a leader in your field and your organization. And the quote that you both, the quotes that you brought were a direct result of me asking, so what's something in your life that you'd like, what is it about learning and development that inspires you? Share something that's connected to that. So tell us why you chose the quotes that you selected. Felipe, what was it about that particular quote that struck you?
Yeah. So actually there's a funny story behind that quote, because I saw it in a movie. There was an old movie, and we might consider it very silly, but it was more like a documentary. There was this huge Drew Barrymore fan, and the dream of his life was finally to meet her, ultimately to meet her and interview her. Well, not giving you any spoilers, but yeah, he does. He meets her, and he ends this documentary with this sentence: when you invited me to come today and meet Kevin, and we will talk about our learning development and the impact that it has in so many lives, I truly believe I truly believe that education is something that can change the world. And well, I'm not a teacher or a professor, but I'm a professional that teaches or shares whatever I have with others, and it causes an impact in their lives. And I've seen many lives changed because they had the opportunity to interact, well, either with me or learning and development professionals. So it takes a village, but I choose to believe that we can reach that place where we're going to touch millions and billions of lives by doing what we do.
Hear, hear. All right, tell us the quote again for those that may not have remembered it, like me.
Yeah. There are dreamers and there are believers. I'm a dream believer.
I'm a dream believer. Isn't there a song by the Monkees? Oh, that's Daydream Believer.
Right?
Not
I know which one you're. I can hear it in my head, but I don't know who sing
that. Can it be to a daydream believer? And yes,
oh, yeah. I think that is the Monkees.
All right, Felipe, you have a theme song to go along with your quote.
Perfect.
So, did I just sing? I just sang.
Look, I didn't want to leave you hanging, but I'm totally fine doing it because there's a few things in my life that I won't do, and one of them is sing in public. So, and I'm considering this a public space. Yeah.
You don't do karaoke, Kevin?
No, like I have been to. I love going to karaoke bars or karaoke places, wherever. I like to witness it. I love to enjoy the festivities. I just won't participate in the art of singing, even in a group. I'll just be like, no, I'm over it. So.
Okay, well, before we get into your quote, what is it about karaoke that's so?
Oh no, it's not
No,
karaoke. It's just singing in public.
Singing in public. Okay, what is it about singing in public then?
Uh, I mean, I haven't really thought about it, but there's a part of me that's like, you know where your strengths are and you know where your weaknesses are. And this is 100%. It's not in the strength category. It's not even in the weakness category. It's like one step beyond weakness of like, if I'm by myself in the car, I turn the volume up so loud that I don't hear myself, or I put noise canceling headphones on so I can sing and I feel like I'm rocking a concert only when I'm by myself. So I just know where it is, and I can't pull myself to do it.
You can't. So okay, so maybe you don't sing for us today. I can accept that. But what would you be singing if you were in the car with your noise canceling headphones or?
Whoa, that's a good question. It depends on the day. So like this morning, it was like on the way to pick up my fiance from work. It was like early 2000s rap.
Which one?
Oh, I mean, any Snoop. I mean, I love, and that's not 2000s, but I love Tupac. I mean, I love all the old school rap that's more poetic than it is where the lyric repeats itself over and over again. I'm not into that. Like that's to me, that's not quality. But like any of the more poetic rappers, I love that. I love country music. I mean, definitely a country music fan. And then I don't know what kind of music I guess it would be pop, maybe. There's a guy named Eric Hutchinson. Um, and I listened to this song called "The People I Know." Um, it's a really cool song. It can actually be a really cool theme song for your podcast. So you have to check it out.
People I know. Okay,
I think it's called "The People I Know."
Cool. Well, I'm writing it down right now so that I won't forget, and I'll look it up. So we took a little detour to talk about your song preferences, but I always find when somebody says something so definitive, like I don't do X, I'm kind of like, ooh, what made you decide not to do
Let's
X?
explore that.
Like, let's peel that back.
Yeah.
Sorry, you woke up the coach in me.
Hey,
so
we're game for it.
Let's go back to your quote though. First of all, there are two of them.
Yeah.
So share the quote again and then tell us what was the significance of that quote for you.
I won't give you the full quote because it's a long one, right? But it's Robert McKee, and he basically says that he challenges you to write every day, and then he defines it. He's like, go line by line, page by page, hour by hour, and then he goes into the piece about like you need to write authentically, despite the fear that you have, and just know that if you're authentic in that space and what you put down on the paper. And when someone reads it, your story can dazzle somebody else's world, and you can become that hero for them. And so and then the second quote was stories are data points with a soul. I bring those two because there was I forgot when this happened, maybe 10 years ago. I was delivering a leadership development talk at some conference. And before I delivered it, I was kind of ideating what I wanted to say and how I wanted to open it up. And I opened it up with this provocation. I was like, okay, who here has a coffee table in their house, right? Everybody raised their hand. And I said, who here has a book on that coffee table? Oh, yeah, most people raise their hand because most people have a book on the coffee table. And I said, when people come over to your house and you invite people into your home, they almost always will pick up the book on the coffee table and start looking through the pictures or reading a little bit. And I said, I want you to think for a moment that your life is that book on the coffee table. Would people continue to read it, or would they find it uninteresting? Would they find it rude? Would they find it unmotivating? Would they gain ultimate life clarity from it? What do you want people to read in your life's book? And so I've adopted this philosophy that every day we get to contribute a page in a new chapter. And some chapters may be terrible and we may go through a slump in our life, but it isn't the way a book starts. It's the way a book ends that makes you remember it. And so I talk about stories a lot because there's this documentary called I Am. And there's a line in there that says, we tell ourselves stories in order to exist. And I find that to be super fascinating.
That is fascinating. I love that imagery, right? To think about if my life was in a coffee table. I don't have a coffee table, by the way, so I'm one of the few people who would have not raised their hand. But
if
table book on my shelf.
Yep.
But I think this idea of having the kind of life that's worthy, one of other people reading, being inspired by it, even wanting to opening up, like being curious enough about it, and you know, to your point, it could be, is it boring? Is it exciting? Is it filled with misdeeds? Is it filled with honorable mentions? Like, what is it? That's kind of cool. So yeah, every day by day, hour by hour, we're writing the pages to our book.
Yep. So
interesting. What's in your book, Kevin?
You know, I would say my book is kind of like watching cats being herded. You know, it's a little bit all over the place. You know, I started off, actually my undergraduate degree is in biblical text. I wanted to actually be in the clergy.
No, Felipe and I both are like,
what? Wow. And then I realized through a host of a lot of things that happened in my life, or that was happening in my life, I was like, well, I can't, I don't think I want to be in the clergy. B, like, I just can't. And then I thought, well, I was like, well, shoot, like I can't, I'm not gonna be able to get a job with a Bible degree. I'm gonna have to like convince people to give me an opportunity. So I went and got my master's in higher ed and ultimately my doctorate in organizational leadership. But what's always been a consistent theme, I guess, in that book is while my professional titles have changed over the years, what's always been kind of at the center of it is helping make an organization or an individual become the best version of who it is. And so when I was in fundraising, I was a VP of fundraising for a private school in Austin. It was about bringing the resources to that organization to make them thrive, right? To give them the resources to do what they needed to do to achieve their mission. And then for learning and development, it's about presenting the right opportunities to meet folks wherever they are on the developmental journey, and give them the opportunity to explore something new, inspire action, and then help them gain the confidence to be able to deliver those things.
Fascinating. I mean, I can see, right? It's so cool to be able to connect the dots in different parts of our lives, and kind of what was it that, what I like to use. My favorite quote, since all of you brought quotes, I have a quote too.
Share it, please.
Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs are more people who have come alive. And that's by Howard Thurman. He's a theologian, so go figure. But one of the things that, you know, you said there is when we identify what it is that makes us come alive, and we start to notice, man, this shows up, this version of me shows up in all these different instances. Like, this is something I'm so committed to that I do it instinctively. Right. That's a really cool thing to be able to pay attention to. I know Felipe shows up for you too. So I'm curious, what's on your coffee table book of Felipe?
Oh yeah, wow. I was thinking about like my own journey, and I can picture a story where I'm really, you know, like peeling to get to the center of whatever it is. Well, not whatever it is, to my true self. That's what I would say. And I love what Kevin said about meeting people where they are and maybe helping them, right, grow from there. That's, which is also related to his quotes and everything. Everyone has a story, right? And I've been learning to notice the beauty in everyone's story, try to understand it, and see where I meet these people and if I may contribute in any way, you know. So I've been thinking about that for the last couple of years, and it's been definitely interesting.
Well, tell us one of the stories.
I remember I was at a museum with one of my best friends in Rio, and we were in one of the sentences that was there. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it reminded me of my dad. And then we started discussing about like that particular piece of art, and the movie that I had discussed with him like a couple of days earlier. And then we got to a point where I said, well, but I'm not sure if I'm able to understand, these specific piece of art, or there are a bunch of movies that I don't think I quite understand. And then she said, well, you understand what you understand, and there is value in that. So if I understand, if I see it in a different way, I saw it in a different way because of my background, because of this, and that. But it doesn't mean that what you saw is wrong. It's just different, right? And then right after I listened to that, I went to my training sessions, as we are talking about training so much, really considering that, well, maybe that person that is watching my session might not understand that topic the way I do, but their experience, their background, their beauty will definitely make them understand it somehow. And they will apply it in the way they feel comfortable, in the way they feel free to do it. As long as it touches them, I'm doing my job, right? So yeah.
That's huge. It's funny, since I've started my own business, it's been 3 years now. Um, on occasion, I'll get some random either email or Facebook or LinkedIn message or something from someone who I did a workshop for years ago. I'm talking like 10 years, sometimes 8 years ago. Oh, I remember you said XYZ in this workshop, or I remember when you came to visit our hotel and I was like, oh, I don't remember this. What did I say? But I think to your point is, whatever it is that we need in that moment, or whatever I think the three of us probably could agree on something similar, but we came to share something that we learned. We know that it's going to be beneficial or impactful for the people that we're delivering it to. We were compelled to share something in a certain way for a certain purpose. And then the group or the individual that happened to be there in that moment was in a space in their life or in their career or in their day where just what we said or what we did in that moment, boom, opened up the lock to something, or transformed the way they relate to something, or right. And we will never sometimes have the benefit of knowing who or what it was that, what it is that we did or said. But I always find that so, I don't even say satisfying, because it always shocks me. Like, right. Oh, and I feel guilty because I'm like, I don't remember this. And it's really none of my business. Whatever they got for themselves. Kind of like, right. You told.
But those moments are from a person who, especially like training and development, right? Which all of us on this podcast understand. Like that's how I met Valerie. She's a facilitator for one of the programs we do here at Anheuser-Busch. But those moments of affirmation are the nuggets of fuel us trainers and developers need to carry on. I remember this was like 4 years after I graduated undergrad. I got a random card in the mail from somebody I went to school with. And it was like, I don't know if you know this, but one night you spoke at a devotional and you said these things. And I want you to know I've carried that with me all these years. And it actually meant the world to me that night because, and they went on to explain, whatever the situation was they were going on with. And so like, I remember that, like, I remember the person I got it from. I remember all of the whole context of it. And I was like, whoa. And then you realize how powerful your words or your example can be for others. And 99.9% of the time, you'll never know. You'll never get that card. You won't get the email. You won't get any of it. Yeah. You'll just need to know that as long as someone isn't telling you you're doing a bad job, you're most likely doing an excellent job.
Well, it goes back to what you were saying about the coffee table book, right? Yeah. So if we're not going to remember what happened, somebody else will. Yeah. And it better be a good memory, hopefully, right? A memory
and that if you go back to that, you take that thought, you're a page in somebody else's book. Yeah. You're going to be a character, you know, like, and so it's like, what are you contributing? Like, yeah, you've got your own book, but your contributions affect others. And so hopefully, like what you're doing, we hope you're a good character in Felipe's book, right? And so, or my book, whatever. I'm not on the podcast.
I'm not really sure, but I don't think it's the right time or place that we should discuss that, Kevin. Let's move to the next
Moving
topic,
on.
Valerie.
Okay. No time for feedback right now.
Yeah.
Oh, Trip. So, no, I think one of the things that I think are really interesting in the beginning of our conversation, as we were kind of warming things up, I told you guys that I introduced the two of you on LinkedIn, right? So now I'm curious, what were you left with after that introduction? Because these are sometimes how people meet one another, right? In the world of business, especially, is there some sort of, hey, I know you, and I introduced two people. So I'm curious about what was that experience like, and what happened that it didn't quite come into some, fruition. It didn't come to fruition at the time.
Yeah, I'll actually open up and say this. This is an interesting piece of LinkedIn that's happened to me only now having been at Anheuser-Busch. I have never gotten more messages from companies or others than I'm not joking, I get about 10 of them a day. And so when I get messages on LinkedIn, they tend to just get buried. And then at the pace of life, you forget what's happened 3 days ago. Not that that's an excuse, but I know, like, for me, like, I have learned to not ignore, but because the noise is so much, I quickly look, I'm like, okay, anybody here I need to respond to. And I think we responded a couple times, and then it just gets buried. So for me, it was not an aversion of online relationship building. It was the aversion of the noise.
It's just a lot.
Yeah.
I can accept that. Felipe, do you accept that?
Absolutely. And it has a lot to do with the calendar as well. It was almost like Thanksgiving for you, and then the holidays came in, and you had some time off. So I understand it was, maybe not the best time, but I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, and here we are.
This is meant to be. I literally, you guys, Felipe, you might know because we talked about this, but literally, I remember having a conversation with Felipe, and I said, hey, so did you ever get a chance to connect with Kevin? And you said what you said about, no, the calendar, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, okay. I started this podcast, or the idea of the podcast was back in December when it actually started coming together. My first episode was on December 29th. And as I started to kind of build and think about, who might I have? This experience of, hey, there are two people who have connected, who haven't actually connected. That's because they're supposed to be on the podcast. This is the second time this has happened. The two of you, and then I had another two people who I introduced via email who never got a chance to connect. And I was like, it's because you're supposed to do it here live with me. But one of the reasons I thought the two of you would be really cool to connect is not only because of the learning connection, specifically about learning and development, but at the time, Felipe, you and I were talking a lot about social responsibility and some of the desire that you had in really connecting with that particular type of organization. And Kevin, I thought specifically some of the things that I'd heard you share about what Anheuser-Busch was doing, I was like, oh, wow, I wonder what drives a company to say that this is how we want to commit, or this is how we want to contribute to the communities that we support. and that's kind of where I thought this would be a great conversation, because then you could take a desire and an interest and see, well, what kind of questions or what type of information should I find out or learn about so that I can connect with that kind of organization. So that's why I brought that up. But now that you guys are here in person, Felipe, what would you want to know about that? Or Kevin, what would you want to share about that?
Yeah, well, I assume we both, well, I don't know, I'm gonna say it for myself, but I believe Kevin can share that feeling. For me, it's about giving back and really contributing. You know, if I have the opportunity to learn a bit or to know what I know, why not cause this impact in someone's life? You know, because I think it can be so helpful. So I can be a better character, you know, for someone else's story. So yeah, it's pretty much related to that, I would say. And he already mentioned, I'm very curious. Well, I'm still in kind of, you know, like the host spot here, but I definitely want to know about him, because he mentioned like Simon Sinek and Brene Brown, and I'm a huge fan of them as well. So I would like also to learn from Gavin where he gets his inspiration from to be so a better professional as he is.
You should ask him. You should ask him.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at him. So I'm
okay. I mean, I can take that as the question. So I may try to answer Valerie's real quick about like.
Yeah, I'm mixing things here. I'm so sorry.
No, because they're tied. I think they're tied. Now, what I can't do is speak definitively for an organization, but what I can say is this: is that I think organizations in general choose different avenues of social contributions that align with where they see they can have the most impact. Mm-hmm. So I'll do a shout out to Anheuser-Busch and something that they've done this year that I thought was pretty amazing. I don't know if anybody knows this. I mean, but the diversity of African-American women in the brewing space is really, really low. There's not a lot of Black women as brewers.
What?
I don't drink beer. I don't know. So, but one of the things that we did is we launched what's called the Natalie Johnson Scholarship. And it is a scholarship through the United Negro College Fund, UNCF. We donated $1 million to that to create this scholarship to help bring awareness to the brewing space and to try to bring diversity into that space. It's a pretty cool thing, and it was launched by now I'm drawing a full blank. Professional NBA basketball player. I'll think of it here in a minute, but he was also the new co-founder of Budweiser Zero, and so which is a non-alcoholic beer. And so like those types of things. And then I know we're doing one right now for economic stimulation, several $1 billion over the next 3 or 4 years, invested back into the community in St. Louis. We're doing a thing now where we're taking all of the grain that's part of the brewing process. We're taking it and turning it into flours and supplements for dog food. And like, I don't know all of the things that they're doing there, so don't quote me, internet, but it's called Evergrain. And so it's a brand new endeavor that they're launching. They just broke ground on the factory. And so they're trying to make sure that they're sustainable into that space. And so whether it's aiding to the narrative of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or aiding to the narrative of environmental responsibility, when we're on a cut water, like we're trying to cut our water consumption tremendously, in the process. So like all of those things, you pick avenues that you can contribute well, and that you're not making a trivial transaction contribution, but you're making one that's transformational. It's deep, right? So I think that from an organizational standpoint, you find the ways that you can make deep contributions so that your wave can actually carry others, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you have a place like Anheuser-Busch, when they make an announcement to do something, others will follow. but you have to make sure that you're in the space to where your contribution is a big wave that can carry others with it. You know what I mean? So I think that's kind of where that space is. To answer Felipe's question, man, I don't know that I could even narrow it down about where I get my inspiration, but I'll tell a couple themes. Number one, I get my inspiration from my fiance, and I get my inspiration from my friends and my family. And so for my fiance, Daniel, he's the exact opposite of me. And so I love that about him. And so I think one way, he thinks the exact opposite, and he always draws me into where I'm not thinking. So that's one. My family, you know, who you are today is how you're, you know, all the contributions from your family. You're made up of that. So that's part of me. Then the other part is I've got a couple friends that I talk to almost every day. I talk to them. And so we're always just talking about like life and whatnot. Like I got a friend, his name's Steve. He's a storyteller. He's a marketer, but he's really big about storytelling. Me being passionate about stories and life stories, we're always talking about how this has, like, the actions that you do every day has a profound effect on those who read what you contribute. And so I find a lot of inspiration from those conversations when we can just talk about whatever and there's no agenda. And then at the end of it, I'm like, oh man, we just created something pretty cool. I think we've probably created 45 businesses, you know, through the time we talk, and then we just leave them be. But you know, it is what it is.
Well, you know what I think is interesting is when you're talking about the individuals that inspire you, they're not celebrities per se. They're just like people with whom you connect, right? They're people that you have committed your life to. They're individuals with whom you know you have space, opportunity to share who you are and what you think and ideas that you might have. And I would say the same. I mean, there are a handful of people, the notable people that others might know, but I don't necessarily consider like regular inspiration for me. My latest one, I can't remember who asked me this recently. I think it was a podcast perhaps I was on, and they asked like who inspires me, and I said, you know, my 7-year-old niece inspires me. And one of the things that, and I don't think I've ever shared this on my podcast, but you guys are inspiring me to share stuff on my podcast now. But I used to hate, and I do not really enjoy drawing and coloring. I just didn't have the patience for it because I thought, oh, it just takes too long. I'm not quite good at it. And so therefore the amount of brain power that I have to commit to in order to have something decent is like not worth it for me.
Yeah.
That's how I interacted. But then at the beginning of the pandemic, my niece Rosa and I, because she's only 7, by the time she was only 6, there are very few things we could talk about like on the phone or on Zoom or something. And often when I would reach out to my brother, he would say, oh, she's drawing or she's coloring or something. So I'd start chatting and, hey, so what are you coloring? What are you doing? Oh, I'm making a blah, 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 blah. And eventually I just said, well, can you teach me how to make one? Okay. And she's so good. Like, talk about learning and development. My brother would put the video or his phone close by, and she's like, okay, now we're going to use pink. Do you have pink? Okay. Now, and then you're going to draw a line, and she would draw a line, and then she'd hold it up to the screen like this. And we would do this step by step. And I was like, that's pretty impressive. She's a great teacher. So I can already see she gets that from me. And so then we started coloring. So I'm going to show, okay, so like this is the most recent one. Look at that. It was her birthday. All freehand, by the way. Hello. Well, actually, not all freehand. I did do it straight edge for the lines, but
right.
Everything else was freehand. We have done self-portraits. This is a portrait of me, or her, I think it was her. And we were learning how to draw Black Panther's mask. and then she wrote my name. And it's been so much fun because I'm there kind of like open learning. And one of the things I so appreciate and inspired by her is she's always so joyful about it, even when it's hard, or even if she's like, oh, I don't like how that turned out. But okay, I'm just gonna keep going. She doesn't like throw the paper away like I would have, or just give up like I would have, or I probably did when I was her age. She's like keeps going and she'll do something else with it. But I find that really inspirational. So I think having some people in our lives, like you said, Kevin, that help us look at things a different way. Yeah, she's opened up my mind to something that I was like very. Ugh. And what I'm committed to, and I think that's the other thing I heard you say, you were talking about Anheuser-Busch, is to identify some place where you think you can make a difference, like a place where you want to contribute that matters. And for me, relationships and connecting with people in meaningful ways is what matters. And so when I thought, oh, I can connect with a 7-year-old by coloring and drawing, which is something totally out of my comfort zone, and be meaningful, dude. So now when I go visit them, she's like, are you ready for an art class? We literally have an art class every time I visit them. So that's what's happening in my world.
That's really good. You find ways to connect with those that, and this goes back, Felipe, you brought this out when I mentioned it, where you meet people where they are. Like you met her where she was in that space. It was about coloring, and we can all probably tell stories about where we've met people where they were. And like I think about this, like if you could reflect on a moment of like where someone met you, where you were, like I know that there have been times where like I've either been struggling with something, wrestling with something, or I'm frustrated or whatever it may be. And someone stepped in and was like, hey, let me help you. I'm going to meet you right there. Those are powerful moments.
They are. I love those. Felipe, what I see you nodding and smiling a lot, so something must be hidden over there. What are you thinking?
Yeah, it makes me think about a bunch of situations where I lived.
Oh, just an Aspen sighting. Hi,
yes,
Aspen.
she was whining at me, so I just picked her up.
Aspen, oh my gosh, this is her first podcast dog.
This is her first podcast. She wanted to say hello to Felipe. Valerie, so I just brought her up here to say hello because she wasn't gonna stop bothering me until I did it.
She looks very comfortable. She's like, you're not putting me back down.
Yeah, I was just remembering a bunch of situations where either I was the person that helped or maybe was helped, because I was helped a lot, of course. And yeah, just as I was listening to him, picturing lots of situations in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you, so I'll revert the question back to you, Felipe. You asked me where I find inspiration. Where do you find it for you to do the things that you do, to get up in the morning, to find joy, to smile? Like, what is that motivation for you?
Mm-hmm. It's funny because although I started my question mentioning like famous people like Simon Sinek or Brene Brown, I just got out of an interview and they asked me that, and my answer was pretty similar to your answer. So I didn't mention those names. I mentioned the conversations that I have with my friends, with my parents, and well, what's on TV, all of that really is really interesting, and it makes me think on how I can be part of that conversation, or how can I, maybe leverage or again, contribute in different ways. I do like to study, well, we have fascinating tools nowadays. But yeah, ultimately, those are the people that are inspiring me every day. And I strongly believe not only them, but I have a very strong belief. I'm very optimistic. Of course, I have my ups and downs, but in the end of the day, well, again, I'm a dream believer, right? So that really resonates with me.
You know what I think is, this is a sad moment about society, but it's okay. It's so, how the news embellishes everything. Like they take an element of someone's story, someone's life, a situation, and it's embellished so much to where the truth is now so diluted, you don't know what is truth, what's embellished, what's made up. And so it's hard to find inspiration from people who are on TV or are on our phones, because you don't know what truth is anymore, because really the news now isn't about the news, it's about the ratings. And when you make your news station about the ratings, you will manipulate that to fit your narrative.
Yeah.
Right.
I watched something. It gave me I don't know if optimism was at play at the moment, but there's this guy that I can't remember his name right now, but he plays piano. He's a YouTuber. And I kind of stumbled upon him and another guy they were doing some collaboration with music. And one of the things he mentioned, he always gets told, because he's so talented, he has perfect pitch, so he's able to listen to something once and then replicate it on the keyboard. And they tell him all the time, you should be on America's Got Talent or Britain's Got Talent or whatever, whoever's listening to him at the time. And he did a whole video talking about why he would not. And I'll put it in the show notes if people want to refer back to it. And it was like a 20-minute video, which I was like, I don't really know this guy, but I'm really curious about why he gets so much, he gets this compliment so much, and yet he decides not to. And a couple of the main reasons were, one, he makes way more money as a YouTuber on his own than he ever would if he were to go on this nationally syndicated thing. And then the second thing was really interesting, and touch on what you just said, Kevin, is that they have the rights to everything you do while you're in that bubble. So they have video cameras, according to him and what he read in the agreement or the contract or whatever, what his friend, somebody he knew was on it or whatever. You sign your life away essentially for actually very relatively little amount, right? And the idea is that they can take whatever they record and sculpt it to fit the narrative that they want. And that was one of the main reasons. He's like, I really believe in authenticity, and I want to be able to share my art and craft the way I want to, not for it to be shaped. Which I think, for me, by the way, I want to claim that there's nothing here that is, this is true life. This is authentic. None of these are not actors. No one's getting paid for anything, including me. We're having a conversation just like if we were meeting up at a coffee shop. So anyway, I just thought that was so fascinating. And you're right. I think it's tough nowadays to find something that is actually just, especially in the public, that is not so contrived and sculpted.
We've also trained ourselves to like drama, with the onset of reality TV. Like, we're conditioning ourselves to love drama, and that if our life doesn't follow suit, it's now uninteresting. It's like the Instagram or the TikTok, whatever. It's the FOMO, the fear of missing out. Like I don't need to benchmark my life to somebody else's, because my life is my life. And if my life wants to be a slow pace, stay in the same town all my life and contribute there, fantastic. Contribute, do that. But if you want to travel the world and do whatever and vlog everywhere you go do it. It's okay. But we have to be okay with where we are, because if we're not okay with where we are, we're never going to be okay with where we're going.
Preach. So I want to mention something, because all three of us are in completely different, not only locations, but different stages of life too. So Kevin, did you grow up you're in St. Louis, you said, right?
Yeah, I'm in St. Louis. I grew up here till I was 20.
Okay, 20. And then you went?
I went to Nebraska, West Texas, Malibu, California, Austin, Texas, Washington, D.C., back to St. Louis.
All right. So you've had your anything international or overseas?
I've been international. I've not lived international.
Not lived. Okay, got it. And then Felipe, what about for you? You're in, I think I don't know if you mentioned it already since we started recording, but.
I don't think so. No, I'm in São Paulo, Brazil. And apart from São Paulo, I spent 5 years living in Rio. And I did have international experiences, but they were really, really short, like a month or 2 month experience living abroad.
What, you're gonna tell them about Disney?
So yeah, funny fact, I was a cast member, so I spent 2 months working for Disney World. And then I spent a month when I was older living in Switzerland to learn German.
So what character were you if you were a cast member? Did you play a character or were you in a play, in a musical? What was it?
I'm very short. I know it doesn't seem, no, I'm kidding. But believe it or not, I was not a character. I was, I worked at the Emporium, which is one of the biggest stores that they have when you get in Magic Kingdom. So yeah, I was a merchandise cast member. Yeah, I'm not. I wish I could do what they do, because like my dream job. This is gonna sound really ridiculous, but as we are here, every time I step out of a musical, I think that's my dream job. I think it's so fascinating seeing those people like singing, acting, and dancing at the same time.
Yeah.
That I wish I were, like part of that cast. I was part of a different cast.
Hey, look, it was all part of the cast nonetheless, and it is what it is. I could never be, hence my fear of singing in public. I couldn't be that kind of musical cast member. Never.
You guys might surprise yourself. I don't know. I have a feeling, we won't do it here today, but I have a feeling that if you had the right opportunity with a little bit of coaching, no.
Nope. Sorry, Coach Valerie. Not gonna happen.
Not today. But as we start to round out this conversation, I'm really curious. Now, we kind of went all over the place, right? Talking about a bit of our backgrounds and what inspires you, but I'm now curious about your experience being on this podcast. First of all, and I'm so grateful to the two of you for saying yes to be here. I don't take for granted that having a public meeting and having, personal conversation is not for everybody, but both of you are so willing and able. I'm so grateful for that. But I'm curious about what's your experience been, knowing that you met on LinkedIn months ago, and then now having this conversation here. What's been interesting? What's been, surprising? Any of those things?
Felipe, you want to go, or I can go?
Yeah, I'll take that one first then. No, yeah, it was, I really liked the fact that we were able to go a bit deeper, right? Usually those kind of introductions, like through LinkedIn or even email, we go to a certain level. And here I felt that in 45 minutes, maybe 50, I don't know where we at right now. I'm much more knowledgeable about Kevin than I was 45 minutes ago. And that's like unmanageable, really. Right. So, and I felt really comfortable in sharing even like, these awkward dreams or dream jobs or whatever publicly and with him. So thanks for creating that space as well.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I think for me, being here, what's interesting about it is that you look at another person, and I know logically, I'm like, oh, I just met Felipe 50 minutes ago, hour ago, right? Now, LinkedIn doesn't really count meeting. I think in a post-COVID world, on Zoom is considered meeting. But what's interesting is when somebody else is endorsed by someone you instantly feel like you know them better than if I'd have just ran into you at a restaurant or a bar or on the street. Like you just feel that way. And so I think this is that moment of why relationships and community are important for the way we live our lives every day. And so I'm passionate. Shout out to Steve Caldwell. We always talk about community development, about how it's the most important thing you'll ever do in your life. And if you don't have one, you're not really living. And so I just think that this is an aspect or an element of community. So I appreciate it.
Yay. So I'm curious, between the beginning of this and now as we're ending, how have you changed? How have you been impacted by this conversation? If you had to add this to your coffee table book, what would you write about it?
I would just say that even, and these are things right? Like you know this inherently, but like, Felipe is dialing in from the other side of the world, from where we are. And it just shows you like, yes, the world is very big, but you are one click away from being connected with somebody else. And I think those are the moments that if you underestimate the power of technology and how it's empowered us to connect with others, these are the moments that remind you that it's something greater than we probably give it credit for.
Cheers to that. One click away. Like a click as in a clicking on a mouse, not a click as in a kilometer, by the way. Felipe, what about for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. It just reinforces how much we have to share to one another, and even having such different backgrounds coming from different places. We do share some values and some things that they really can be discussed even miles away. I think that's about the human being experience, So yeah, I'm very glad to know that there are special human beings all over, and I just met one that shares so many of my thoughts.
There are more of us. There are more. Now, knowing this is very contained amount of time, right? In a relationship that's, I don't want to say superficial because we did go a bit deep in the content, but again, you guys really beyond this would probably need to know more information. So what questions, not necessarily to answer them this moment, but what questions are you left with about one another or about what we talked about today?
I'm wondering, not that you have to answer this online, but I'm wondering what job you interviewed for. Right. So that was exciting. I'm like, oh, Felipe is about to build a new chapter into his book. If he's about to take on a new opportunity, there's going to be a new chapter, right? And so the questions on that, I'm like, what are you running towards? I hope you're not running away from anything, because that never feels good, that you're running towards something new. And what do you hope to, like, what's the onus behind looking for that growth, right? So like I'm always interested in why people, I like my dad has been in his place for 45 years.
Like his home or
no, his place of work.
Oh, job.
Yeah, his job. Same place, goes in the same door, has the same locker, and just recently had to get a new lock because it finally broke after 40-something years. And I'm like, whoa, like the thought behind that, like I'm interested in how people stay motivated into a space like that. And then I'm always interested in why people go and do what they do.
The next. Okay, there you go. So that's for part 2, perhaps to be continued.
Part 2, we can get the update on Felipe's job interview.
Felipe, what about for you? What are you left with? What questions or what do you wonder about as it relates to what Kevin's shared so far?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure. Well, yeah, I was very interested in knowing that while he lived in so many different cities, I've been to some of them, I haven't been to some of them. So that would be great to learn more about all those places and how those places influenced in the Kevin that we are seeing here in front of us. Well, I'm also a dog person. I want to adopt a dog next year, probably. So we'll get some tips on that as well. And yeah, so, and he also mentioned, well, he has a fiance. So that I had the same feeling that a new chapter is about, right? Maybe to start. So already wishing you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yay.
Yeah, we're
well,
excited.
I so had fun to have the two of you connect here. And you're right, just one click away and you can connect with a new person, find out something new, and perhaps, add something of value to your personal coffee table book.
There we go.
Any final words before we wrap up here?
I'm going to send you a coffee table.
Well, I'm actually not a fan of coffee tables. I like to have a lot of open space, but
this is a growth moment as your coach. You need to find ways to stretch yourself.
own a coffee table.
So I'm gonna help you on that one, Valerie, because you're my mate. So we should next time I go to the US, we're gonna meet. I don't know, maybe somewhere in the middle. We're gonna invite Kevin to go on a karaoke bar with us. Maybe we can find the next American Idol. I don't know.
Oh.
Hey.
Ooh. You've been wishing a long time, Felipe. You've been wishing a long time.
Well, one thing, Kevin, you alluded to this about building community. We don't take this for granted either. So here in Not Quite Strangers podcast, all of my guests, we actually have an opportunity to come together once a quarter. So all the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as some of our VIP listeners and viewers, get invited once a quarter to a gathering. And Felipe and I actually coordinate those gatherings. The next one is coming up soon in June. And Kevin, you are invited. And we'll send you a little follow-up. But this is an opportunity to continue to meet a lot of not quite strangers and connect in meaningful ways. As Felipe and I have discovered through the process of just getting to know more and more people, connecting them, even with individuals who they didn't interview with, has a huge impact on what they now know, what the access they have, resources, music that they would have not listened to had it not been for that person. Like I already have Eric Hutchinson on my list because of this conversation. So boom, take a look at that.
Yeah, check him out.
Yes. So thank you so much. Any final words, Felipe?
Oh yeah, I'm just waiting for this actual gathering, in-person gathering, so we can celebrate it. Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Valerie. I appreciate it. And thank you, Felipe, for becoming a new friend.
Thank you. Likewise.
So I encourage you guys to connect beyond this or beyond LinkedIn, obviously. And for the rest of you who tuned in, thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Not Quite Strangers. As you know, every other week you will receive this and other episodes in your inbox when you subscribe. So make sure you go to www.notquitestrangers.com so you do not miss a single episode. You can also go to my YouTube channel and subscribe there so you get notified every time a new episode is released. But more importantly, if you want to be a part of this gathering where you get to meet all of these strangers or not quite strangers, you got to subscribe so that we can send you the invitation. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Kevin, Felipe, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing in each other's inspiration. We are now a page in one another's coffee table book. Look at that. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everyone.
You've been listening to the podcast Not Quite Strangers. Be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite video or podcast platform. And for more information and content, go to notquitestrangers.com. See you next time.